What's up, everybody? Welcome to Hail Yes, the Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan football and basketball writer for The Free, joined by my colleague, Big Ten insider Reiner Sabin. He covers both Michigan and Michigan State for us. Only this week, he will have his Michigan pen in hand, so to speak. He's joining me in Happy Valley. I know we also have one Sean Windsor coming, and believe it or not, I'm told we may have a Mitch Albom sighting as well. So we've got all hands on deck headed into a top 10 matchup against Penn State. Are you ready for it, Ron?
I suppose so. I mean, it's about time that Michigan is playing a game of high interest and possibly some level of skepticism or doubt about how the result may play out. So that's always much more intriguing than probably knowing what the outcome is before the game is even played.
Yeah, I had to change my stock watch from 3 up to 3 down for like a month to just 5 players who were trending up because Michigan was just beating the brakes off everyone so much. There were not 3 players. So I do look forward, as you said, to dissecting the game, getting into the X's and O's. I mean, we met with Jim Harbaugh this week. Defensive backs coach and co-defensive coordinator Steve Clinkscale, running backs coach Mike Hart, and they had a lot to say about a very talented Penn State team. But before we get to that, we have to keep the main thing, to borrow a phrase from J.J. McCarthy. And that's the latest in the sign stealing scandal that also includes a little development about Purdue and Ohio State and Rutgers potentially colluding last year. We'll get into that. But Reiner, I think we need to start with what seems like the most pressing matter, and that is that the Big Ten notified Michigan on Monday it could face potential punishment. Now, there's a 48-hour window to sort of respond, which is why some are bracing for maybe a potential punishment to come today, Wednesday. We're recording at 1:52 right now on Wednesday. We're going to get this up as soon as we finish because things are moving fast, but we don't know if anything's coming today. Are you hearing anything?
No, I mean, again, things are moving fast. I think part of the reason why there's so much gray and so much doubt about it is because this is such an unprecedented situation. And so I think there's a lot of variables at play and things that are influencing how it's proceeding, changing by the moment. And as new information gets, published or revealed, it changes the dynamics of the whole situation. Very fluid environment. And so, I mean, who knows what's to come here and what to believe almost, because it just seems like it changes by the minute.
Right. It's NCAA bylaws, it's Big Ten policies. It's and as we know, I mean, the NCAA, we've said it how many times on this show, notoriously moves very, very slowly. But the Big Ten is the one who could be handing down, levying this punishment. But I found it interesting. I mean, in recent days, Michigan has also been, I mean, it feels like a war analogy, right? Like almost mounting its defense, preparing its defense. In one part, at one hand, you have Sant'Ono writing the letter to Tony Petitti ahead of their meeting last week on Friday. You have Ward Manuel announcing that he was not going to make it to his portion of voting or his involvement with the College Football Playoff Committee on Tuesday because he had important matters to attend to Michigan. I mean, I think everyone can understand that. And it's just on and on, right? And then now you have the latest report about Rutgers and Ohio State sending Purdue different signals of Michigan's ahead of last year's Big Ten championship game. I think, Reiner, you were saying you sort of see that as part of Michigan as posturing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think
it is.
The wrong word? I mean, no, I think posturing is right. I mean, I think the Michigan's trying to muddy the waters a bit, create a smoke screen. I think that's part of their defense because, I mean, by all indications, I mean, this elaborate plot that Connor Stallions executed appears to have been real. I mean, people have evidence of the tickets being bought. There's video evidence of the actions of the purportedly 65 associates, or some of them, actually taping the signal. So, there's a lot out there already, and there's not much that's been refuted, at least publicly, or somebody that has come back and said, no, that hasn't happened as far as the elaborate sign stealing operation that's alleged to have occurred and executed by Connor Stallion. So Michigan seems to be trying to put forth this idea that, well, there's, this, sharing of signals, and, you can put forth the idea that there was in-person scouting on the behalf of Ohio State and Rutgers in helping Purdue, and that those were the agents that helped Purdue against Michigan. But that stuff happens a lot in coaching circles. I had an assistant coach before this story even came up talk about how information is shared, that they share tells, things that they picked up, things that they've noticed, like how, a nose guard stands and what it indicates, and, where people are positioned, and, just things that they've picked up, and they share it if they like, the other assistant on the staff, or they know somebody on staff that they like. And so this stuff happens all the time. But that doesn't technically violate an NCAA bylaw or, a football rule that's been in place, like what Michigan is accused of doing. Michigan's in-person scouting that they used a network to do that, if it is indeed true, would violate a bylaw that's been in place since 1994. So I don't see the equivalent nature of it. I mean, unless people feel strongly enough, or Tony Petitti feels strongly enough, that the two situations line up. But I don't see how any person with any kind of sense would come to that conclusion.
Right. Well, I think, while I do understand certainly the idea of this false equivalency and the layers and levels to each thing, for the record, it is my understanding that what Purdue and Ohio State and Rutgers is being accused of doing is true. I spoke to a number of people who are intricately, easy enough for me to say, involved in this story. And the reason, I guess, I've gotten enough emails about it just to address it with a couple sentences on this podcast. The reason we have not run a story on it, we being the Detroit Free Press, is it has not, the various sourcing and has not met our journalistic standard of integrity to report. Just because other people are reporting it does not mean that we have it buttoned down in all the ways that it needs to be. Now, that said, personally, I have spoken to people. What is being alleged about Purdue having being given signs by Ohio State, by Rutgers, and various signals. I've confirmed that with a former staffer at another Big Ten school, with a current staffer at Michigan, and that this person was talking to a Purdue coach called a Michigan coach last week, a former Purdue, or a former, let's start that over. A former Big Ten staffer called a Michigan coach last week ahead of the Purdue game to say, just so you remember, Purdue did have your signals from last year's Big Ten championship game. So there is some truth. I mean, there is an equivalent level of truth, to my knowledge, of this happening. Now, are they equivalent transgressions? That I think that's where the distinction you're making. But this would be as I understand it, that Ohio State and Rutgers and Purdue all sharing information would also be a violation of the Big Ten sportsmanship policy. Now, that does not mean get distracted by the bigger thing, but I don't want to brush it. I'm trying to be very fair. I'm not trying to brush it aside as nothing. I think all misdeeds are not good. Silly, naive me, want an even level playing field. So that's just in general. So I don't want anything brushed aside. But I also don't want, if Michigan is indeed trying to say, you see all this going on, it goes everywhere, I think it's no big deal. Let's just move on. I also think that's disingenuous.
But Michigan has a alleged scheme since 2021, this supposed thing with Purdue and Ohio State. Maybe it was one game. And the one that Michigan did potentially violated many teams, whereas Michigan was the one, quote unquote victim in this, situation. And so, Petiti has to, I don't envy his situation. I mean, he has to consider Michigan's point. I mean, they're obviously in line for, to compete for a national championship. It'd be very meaningful for a Big Ten conference that would love nothing more than to have a national title, especially going into a year when they're expanding and the brand becomes mightier, so to speak. And to have this level of infighting is not good for the conference in general. But then you have a very large contingent, it seems, within the Big Ten that wants some kind of action taken against Michigan. So it's trying to evaluate what the priorities here are, whether, the constituency that he represents, he carries out their interest in some ways too. And so, and yet levies a very fair punishment, or a fair ruling, I should say, in this situation.
He's stuck between a rock and a hard place,
right?
Because there is nothing that Petiti can do that will appease everyone or not upset everyone, right? Like 50% or like a large portion of people will be bothered by whatever decision he makes. Now, that said, I mean, the pressure that is coming his way is mounting, right? It's not just from the Big Ten. It's not just from the AD. I mean, it's now somewhat gotten political. I mean, today, State Representative Phil Skaggs from East Grand Rapids, Graham Filler from DeWitt, and I think like 9 other members of the Michigan House and Senate. I sent a letter to Petiti urging the conference to make sure Michigan gets a, quote, fair and unbiased investigation, right? And so I don't think that's going to change anything, but it's just another layer, right, of just the level of involvement that this has gotten to.
Well, true. And then you also have the idea that the NCAA is possibly involved in the, or has been reported to be involved with the situation at Central Michigan now. And in some ways, you can't lose sight of the big picture here. I mean, something fishy went on here. It seems from Michigan's standpoint, and and this is an integrity of the game issue, and it does have impact on the results. If the as much as people I've talked to within the industry, in the coaching industry, feel very strongly that this has an impact on results. I mean, one person told me it could mean the difference between 10 and 14 points. So there's a lot at play, and people, again, I talked to Todd Berry at the American Football Coaches Association. He's the executive director. His constituency is coaches, and he was talking about if there's been cheating occurred. I mean, it does affect coaches, players' success, coaches' success. Potentially the families as far as jobs are concerned. I mean, so this is kind of heavy stuff, and so it shouldn't be taken lightly as Tony Petiti weighs what's going on here, because it's it's something that kind of reaches to the basic level of the sport.
It does. And you have people on, you've seen on the 4-letter networks now, right, calling for Michigan's head, essentially, right? Stephen A. Smith saying that Michigan should not be allowed to compete in the college football playoff. Paul Feinbaum saying that, any success they had this year would be, looked at with sort of a nose up sort of attitude. It's almost like, well, what is left to say? What is left to do, right? Like, I'm sure if your personal life is, not personal life, but like just non-work hours are anything like mine, right? I've got friends and even family. I have family members who do not care. I cannot get them to even read in what I write, right? But even they are like, what's going on? You know what I mean? And so it has reached a level greater than, obviously, than just the Michigan football bubble, greater than just sports bubble, almost.
Yeah, I mean it's a huge deal. I mean, again, it's one of the most convoluted, strange soap operas that I've ever seen in the college football, and will probably be the source of many books and documentaries and Netflix specials and whatever you have. Because I mean, this is extends to again all areas of the game, and the back and forth between Michigan, the other schools, the Big Ten. All of it is just high level drama here.
It is, and it's just each tentacle you can't see unfold, but nothing sort of surprises. I guess I feel that's a good place to sort of put a pin in it, because anything could develop, but that's where we stand now. I mean, Jim Harbaugh could be facing another suspension. We don't know if that comes, if it won't. But Michigan's just sort of they're just plodding ahead, right? I mean, they called it tunnel vision, right?
Or basically one track mind. Yeah, I mean, it's basically what they kept saying: one track mind, one track mind. And so, I mean, that they really have no choice. I mean, they do have a huge game with Penn State coming up, and that's likely going to determine their trajectory this season. And as far as and especially give them either a ton of momentum, down the stretch, or it could possibly be the roadblock to their whole entire dreams, I guess, as far as how the season is, contextualized for them. So it's there's a lot going on in their heads, but yeah, they have to keep focused on the task at hand.
And we're going to talk about that task at hand, which is a top 10 matchup at Purdue and Happy Valley, right after the break. Don't go anywhere. This is Hail Yes. All right, welcome back to Hail Yes. Penn State game, first true test of any sort this year. Top 10 matchup, number 2 Michigan, number 9 Penn State. It's in Happy Valley. It's in University Park. It's in State College. I don't know. It's somewhere in mid-Pennsylvania. It's difficult as all hell to get there, but we're going to find a way to get there, Reiner. Where do you want to start with this one? I think probably the run game. It's probably a good place to start.
Yeah, the run game is definitely a place to start. I mean, it's not been as good this year for Michigan, and they're going up against one of the top defenses in the country, especially a very talented front seven, a team that likes to, I guess, pressure all from all aspects, including pass, run, whatever. So you're going to see a lot of at the line of scrimmage fights, I guess, in this game. So I would expect the run game to be an essential component for Michigan, and a key factor in determining whether they're going to be successful in this game or not.
Yeah, and I think Penn State's going to want to have something to say about what happened in the run game last year.
Yes.
Michigan just ran, was 400 some yards. I mean, I think video game numbers. And I probably should have had it specifically in front of me, but I've been so busy looking at this year's numbers because last year's don't technically matter anymore. And this year in the run game, it is certainly advantage Penn State. Number 1 in the nation, giving up fewer than 60 yards per game on the ground. Number 1 in the nation in yards per attempt as well. Less than 2 yards per rush. They're allowing 1.9. And you mentioned it. Michigan is struggling on the ground. And frankly, it's because their running back are just not getting to that second level. Mike Hart talked about it today. He didn't directly blame the offensive line, but Reiner, if you're not getting to the second level, I guess really all that can be said for that is the blocking is not there to get there. Now, I mean, we've said it all year that frankly, both Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards have not looked like they did a year ago. And I've done a little more deep dive into the numbers. And I want to see what you think of them, because they're pretty alarming to me. So last year, on 247 rushes, Blake Corum forced 73 missed tackles. Now, I guess technically he could force 2 in one run, right? But let's say it was just he only forced a missed tackle per run. That was 29.6% of his carries. This year, he has 14 missed tackles. That's 11% of his carries. So essentially, 33% of the time, or 1 out of 3 times as many times as last year, he is breaking a tackle. And that's why he hasn't had a 20-yard rush in a month.
Yeah, I mean, and again, they're not getting as many efficient runs as they did last year, as many explosive runs. It's not the same running attack. I mean, they're ranked 51st in the country in rushing yards. I mean, this is not the Michigan football of 2022 or 2021. They also have a much better passing game with J.J. McCarthy, and they're leaning towards that. I mean, you got to recognize your strengths and play to them. That's usually what the good teams do. And right now, the run game isn't as good as the pass game, and it's not necessarily the driving force of this offense anymore. And so J.J. McCarthy's arm is, and I don't know if that's going to change necessarily against Penn State. I mean, but it probably needs to in some ways, because they need to get in some more favorable down and distance situations come third down. Running the ball on the early downs is going to be probably critical or getting yards on those early downs to be able to set themselves up for favorable third down situations.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that third down importance shortly. But just before we do, I mean, it's that I want to in the running game. It's not just Blake, right? It's Donovan as well, and it's how everything is not working together, right? And it's certainly sure the pass game is much better this year, right? But last year when the run game was better, it was like there's going to be a day where they can't run it, right? Can they pass it? Well, I think the inverse of that might be true. There's going to be a day with bad conditions. It's going to be wet. It's going to be rainy. I mean, it's going to be cold. Maybe a wide receiver gets banged up. Maybe JJ's just off, right? Like where you are not passing at full efficiency. You have to be able to run the ball and better than Michigan has, frankly. I mean, Donovan Edwards has 4 rushes that have gone for more than 10 yards this year. That's 5.4 of his attempts. And last year it was almost 14% of his attempts were going for a first down, or we're going for 10 yards or more. There are 8 different rushing lanes to pick through, like left end. We don't need to number them off, right? Donovan Edwards is not averaging more than 4.1 yards per carry in any lane, right? So this is not like they cannot run inside. They cannot run outside. Last week, if you take out those 2 end arounds to Samaj Morgan for 44 yards and to Cornelius Johnson for 14 yards, the running backs had like 28 carries for 87 yards. Yes, they had 4 touchdowns, but that was not against Penn State, right? Penn State forces a lot of tackles for loss. You cannot continue to win if you are always in 3rd and 10. Just not long term, not against elite teams.
Yeah, I mean, but they're not as strong maybe in the middle as they were last year. I mean, they lost, the Remington Award winner with Oluwatimi, and then you've got the fact that Edwards and Corum were coming off injuries this year. I don't know if they're necessarily at the condition, or at least up until this point, we're at the condition that they were last year, and so. Even if they played fewer snaps, obviously they haven't been really had to play at all into the fourth quarter at all this year, except for, pretty much last week. And I think that was primarily because they hadn't played into the fourth quarter, and so it's like, it's very, there's a number of factors that possibly are contributing to this, but at some point you have to kind of accept the fact that this running game is probably not going to come alive, or is not going to be dependent upon to be the driving force of the offense. I mean, I think Michigan has established its identity right now, and it's leaning towards the pass and leaning towards J.J. McCarthy to get them out of bad situations necessarily that the running game has put them in.
Right. And it's working quite well, we should add.
Right.
It's just that when you go into a game against the number 1 rushing defense in the country, and you're not running the ball well, and you're Michigan, and that's what you've been known for, and you return a unanimous All-American running back, you return a running back who was comparing himself to Barry Sanders as Walter Payton, you return the majority of an offensive line that was named the best in the nation each of the past 2 years, right? You add 3 Power 5 transfers, 2 of whom were starter on the line, who were starters at the Power 5 level before, right? I mean, there was everything for this. This is a surprise. The fact that Michigan's run game looks like this is a surprise. There's no other way around it. Yes, there are. The numbers accumulatively won't be the same because of the way the clock has gone this year, right? The new clock rules and just fewer plays. But instead of running for 5, Blake Corum was running for 5.9 yards per carry last year. It's 5.2. Donovan Edwards was 7.1. Now it's 3.1. And the yards before contact, like Blake Corum is getting hit sooner, and so it's just, it's on the line, it's on the running backs, it's on everyone. But how about we look briefly also, Reiner, at those of us who are talking on this podcast or listening to it are pretty familiar with Michigan by now, right? Like this is not maybe some of the level of this, I hope, is new news, and hopefully we are bringing insight, but Michigan leaning more towards the pass and less towards the run this year. We have all seen that. Not everybody might be as privy with Penn State. So I just want us to pick out three names to know that we went through together before the game. And the first is Drew Aller, who has the Penn State's quarterback, equivalent numbers in some ways to J.J. McCarthy, Reiner, right? But this is not an equivalent quarterback, we think.
No. I mean, he hasn't shown that to be. I mean, again, his yards per attempt, he's averaging 4 fewer than McCarthy. He's got 6.6 yards per attempt versus McCarthy's 10.4. That's as big of an indicator as anything. That's a huge difference. And 10.4 is really, really, really good.
It's a massive difference. It's so much bigger than 4-yard sounds.
Yeah. And 6.6 is pretty mediocre. Usually you want to be in that eight range to be considered good. And so ours below, 2 yards below that, and McCarthy's 2 yards above that. So that's a huge difference. And, Drew Aller, again, they've done stuff with slants. It seems like he likes to throw a lot of slants and such like, hasn't really, thrown deep as much, although it looked like they were a little bit better against Maryland, actually far better. And it seemed like they were starting to get some things going there. So maybe they will be able to stretch Michigan's defense a little bit. It'll be interesting to see what Michigan does, if they're going to play a little bit more, man or zone. They've typically leaned towards zone this year, but I could see in certain situations where they'd like to play man. Especially, to disrupt some of those slant routes.
Yeah. I like the thought process there, and I do think it's worth mentioning. It's not that Drew Aller is incapable, I don't think, of throwing downfield. It's part. Penn State, they're not that different from Michigan, right? In the complementary football, leaning on the defense, right? Penn State does not want to turn it over. Hat tip to Andrew Burkle, who will bring in segment 3 for the picks. He was making sure that we discuss this point, and we can bring him on to do the same as well when we get to the picks, but. Drew Aller takes care of the ball very well. 20 touchdowns, 1 interception, right? So it is like short, conservative passes, run the ball with Katron Allen, run the ball with Nick Singleton, and just don't make the big mistake, right? You can play field position. You can let your defense do what it needs to do. And both of our other 2 players to watch are on the defense, one of whom is a familiar name around these parts, right, Reiner? Kalen King.
Yeah, King is one of the top defensive backs in the country, surefire NFL draft prospect, and also, is a person that typically matches up with obviously the top receiver on the other side. So it'll be interesting to see actually who he matches up with, depending on body type too. So you went against Marvin Harrison in Ohio State, and Marvin Harrison, did well against them, but it's Marvin Harrison. What do you expect? Again, 162 yards and a TD, and so it's like that's no shame to lose to him, especially.
I don't know. That's a little bit of shame. Bit of shame. Kalen King is supposed to be a first round, day 1 pick, right? Day 1, day 2. Yes, Marvin Harrison Jr. might be It is the best wide receiver in college football, hands down. But 11 for 162 is cooked. He got cooked.
Yeah, it's true. But I mean, again, does Michigan have a receiver of that type to go against?
No one does.
And so it'll be interesting to see, how he performs in this game. So I mean, it's certainly somebody that he's going to dictate a lot of things that JJ McCarthy does. I mean, whether he wants to throw at them or not. I mean, you could also see because of that, maybe the tight ends are going to get more involved with the game, kind of a la what Michigan did against Michigan State. You can see this being a Colston Loveland game possibly.
Fortunately for Michigan, plenty of options, right? You don't have to just try to force the ball to one person. And that wasn't a slight at Roman Wilson. He's just not the same receiver as Marvin Harrison Jr. He's just not. And also, I don't know if we made the point. I think many people would be familiar. Caleb King is a Cass Tech graduate. That's what we said, a familiar name to many. And then lastly is probably before the season. I mean, this is a very good defensive end as well, but I would have put him as the number 2 defensive end on Penn State before this season. Chop Robinson is the name many know. He was on my preseason All-American team. However, Adisa Isaac might be on my All-American team that actually matters. The defensive end, 18 tackles, 9.5 for loss, 5.5 sacks. Reiner, he is a problem.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he's kind of a linchpin in that defense, that front seven that's so powerful for Manny Diaz. As far as what Penn State's able to do, I mean, from a pass rush standpoint, I mean, they're arguably the best in the country at it. I mean, they're ranked second in the country with 38 sacks. And, Michigan's had some pass protection issues that pop up at times during this year. They gave up 3 sacks in the first quarter against Indiana. It'll be interesting to see how much the read option comes into play for JJ McCarthy, especially in holding those defensive ends and maybe paralyzing them a bit in the passing game. So I wonder how much RPO stuff maybe Michigan kind of tries to use to kind of blunt the pass rush there
and open up the run game. Right.
Yeah.
I think we're about to get into our. Now is when, Reiner, I ask you very quickly before we get to break, our keys to the game. That JJ running could have been it. Give yours, I'll give mine, and then we'll get to the picks.
Yeah, as far as I think, again, it comes down to pass protection. I mean, Manny Diaz loves to dial up a ton of different exotic pressures and blitzes and such. And again, Michigan has shown it's at times some troubles there. Also, I think the running backs are going to be incredibly important in both pass protection and also the screen game. Mike Hart kind of jokingly referred to when I asked about the screen game earlier today. Just the idea that we're not getting into that, or I'm not giving you any secrets about what we're doing in the screen game, but that's where Donovan Edwards could be pretty impactful on the field potentially. But the question is, can he also handle the pass protection? Because at times he has messed up those assignments before and had free runners come at JJ McCarthy. So yeah, I think it's going to be coming down to pass protection in this game because, again, Michigan has shown that it's more of a passing threat probably now than a running threat.
All right. No, it's a good pick. For me, it's third downs. Michigan number 2 in the nation, converting third downs 55.6% of the time. And JJ McCarthy, I mean, he has been money in particular. He's 75% passing on third downs, 33 of 44, 545 yards. 30 of those 33 passes have gone for first downs, 4 have gone for a touchdown. And on third and long, he's been even better. 22 of 29, that's 75.9% passing, 21 first downs, and all four of the touchdowns came on third down. So couldn't be better, right? I mean, those are the money downs. It's what Jim calls it. But he has not faced a Penn State defense on 3rd and 7. On 3rd and 8, he's faced Michigan State and Rutgers and Nebraska and Minnesota. So just like we keep saying about everything, it's a different level. Not all 3rd and 8s are created equal. Not every Happy Valley in the third quarter. I mean, Penn State also hasn't given up a third quarter point, right? When it's 3rd and 8 and you're on your own 10 at Happy Valley and that place is going nuts, it's a little different than 3rd and 7 when you're up by 31 points. in 4-down territory on Bowling Green's side of the field, right? So those big time plays. I think if you look at just the third down line, at Michigan's line and Penn State's line, whoever wins that battle, I bet wins this game.
I think it's a great point, and again, it's also going to come down to whether, again, as I alluded to before, whether Michigan can get some stay ahead of the change on first and second down, and whether the running game can get going. Because if they do get in the third and long situations, they can be confident in JJ McCarthy. But again, as you referenced, this is a totally different animal that they're basically facing with Penn State versus the previous defenses that they faced with so far this season.
All right, Reiner, one more bill to pay, and then we will give the people what they want and see if we pick Michigan to go to 10-0 or and a lot of winning streaks. Let's put it that way. We'll be right back. This is Hail Yes. As promised, that didn't take too long. We are back, and we're back and better than we were before because we have Andrew Burkle with us too, our sports editor and producer of the show. What's up, Andrew?
What's up, fellas? How's it going?
Great. You've been helping steer this ship all the way. How do you think we're doing? We're good so far?
I guess the question does come back to me. Yeah, so far so good. I mean, lots to talk about this week. Oh my gosh, like we didn't even talk about basketball yet. Michigan looked pretty impressive over was it UNC Asheville yesterday, right? So that's certainly a positive for the Wolverines basketball fans. But plenty of time to talk about basketball. But this is what we've been waiting for so long: a competitive Michigan football contest here.
Yeah, and the line is 5. Is that where we start?
Yeah, let's get right into it. Michigan 5-point favorites on the road at Penn State. So, Reiner, who do you got in this one?
I'm going to go with Michigan here. I just think that their offense is overall too strong, and I think they're more of a complete team. And they certainly have the edge at the most important position on the field, which is quarterback with JJ McCarthy. So I'm picking Michigan to go on the road and cover.
All right, fair enough. I too will do that. I think I'm just because all I care about is our own individual competition. I'm 17-14-4. You guys both 16-15-4. Since I have a 1-game lead, I'm just going to have you guys put your picks in first, and then I'm just going to try to pick the same thing so I can maintain my lead. So Michigan will cover because Reiner says so. No, I'm kidding. But I do have Michigan. I think it's just 5 is kind of a weird number. I hate that number 5. That really trips me up. But they're just more proven. I mean, they have a better quarterback. Both have awesome defenses. Who's got a better quarterback? Go with Michigan.
That 5 number is weird, Tony, but it almost feels a little inconsequential to me because I feel like Michigan will either handle them and win by a touchdown or 10 points or maybe even 2 touchdowns, or Penn State could win straight up. Like I don't know. I feel like my gut feeling is that it won't be like a 3-point win at the last second type game. And like you guys said, how can you not trust JJ McCarthy over what we've seen from Drew Aller? I mean, that Drew Aller game against Ohio State when it really mattered. I mean, Penn State's schedule has been a little similar to Michigan's, where it's like they haven't been tested all that much. The one game he was tested against that just stout Ohio State defense, he just was check down Charlie, 18 for 42 for 191 yards, and they really couldn't move the ball. So that Michigan defense, I don't think it's going to be that much different. So I'm going with the Wolverines as well here.
No, I would just say, and arguably Michigan's played, it's performed the best when it's been on the road. What they did against Nebraska, Minnesota, Michigan State. They've played their most complete games on the road, and this is not some new phenomenon. They've been a very good road team going back to 2021, and so I would argue that they're in more a comfortable environment in a place like Happy Valley sometimes than even the Big House.
Yeah, and as we keep making the point that Michigan's yet to play someone like Penn State, right? I mean, Drew Aller hasn't, even though Ohio State's a very good defense, nobody's gone against this Michigan defense, right? So it cuts both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't really know how how good this Michigan defense is. I mean, we think it's pretty darn good based on all the stats, but
I'm pretty convinced it's pretty good.
We're pretty sure it's pretty good.
I like their chances. I like their chances.
But yeah, yes, exactly. So, okay. Reiner briefly mentioned Michigan State here at Ohio State. Tough spot for the Spartans after their first win of the Harlan Barnett era. Tony, who you got in this one?
Who did? I was waffling on this one as well. I think I went with Michigan State just because that's a lot of points. I mean, Ohio State under Mark D'Antonio for a while, Michigan State played Ohio State extremely tight, pretty much always. I think it was even in 2016, if I'm not wrong, when they lost all those games in a row, like 9 in a row. I think that they were in they went for a 2-point conversion or something or other to try to win it. So there was a time where Michigan State always hung with Ohio State. In recent years, it's just been a dump trucking, right? Like 50-6 or just, I mean, but down by 35 at the half, I think a couple years in a row. However, this year, Ohio State, their offense is just not, it's not CJ Stroud. It's not, or Justin Fields or whatever. Like, it's a good offense, but it's just not boom, 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 boom. And I think 31.5, I think that hook, I love the hook. It might be just enough. 38-7 and cover by like the skin of their teeth.
That's my thinking in this game is that it's not about Ohio State's offense; it's about their defense. I mean, can Michigan State actually score on Ohio State? And I'm not totally convinced that they could score, much more than a touchdown and a field goal, if that. And the question is, can Ohio State score enough to cover? And I think they can, but I'm thinking it's more of a game like, 34-3 or,
I like that too. We'll take that too.
Yeah, 35. Yeah, or that would actually not cover.
That'd be a win. Yeah.
35, it'd be like a 35-3 game or something like that. Yeah, and so that's why. I mean, Ohio State has the number 2 ranked defense in the country right now. Jim Knowles has his guys doing some really good things. And Michigan State hasn't proven that they can consistently move the ball. Now, if they use Sam Leavitt a little bit more than they have, and that's the question, I don't know how much they want to use him, then I don't have much confidence that Michigan State can move the ball if they have to rely solely on Caden Hauser to be the guy in this game. So, that's why I'm picking Ohio State to cover, though.
Reiner's Freudian slip there, the 34-3. Is exactly why I'm picking Michigan State. That's a lot of points. And Ohio State is only beaten teams by more than 32.5 twice this year. Western Kentucky and Purdue. So they're just not a team who's been blowing teams out this year. Even early on, some of the games this year, like Indiana got off to a little bit of a better start against Ohio State, kept it close. Obviously, the Maryland game was only 20 points. I think that ended up being a cover. But that was, they kind of like hung around there. Wisconsin 24-10, even Penn State 20-12. These games are just not total annihilations like Ohio State has done to Michigan State in recent years. So I'm just going to take the points. It's just quite a few points, and I'm going to roll with Michigan State in this one. Let's take a look down in the SEC. Georgia starting to look really dominant over the last few weeks here. Reiner, SEC is your specialty, so we'll start with you on this one. 10.5-point favorites over Ole Miss.
Yeah, I think Georgia's hitting its stride, and the fact that Carson Beck and that offense seems to be coming along nicely at this point. And then you add in the fact that it just seems like Lane Kiffin in these games it doesn't ever seem to come up with the result that you'd expect him to do. A lot of people think he's a person who can take down these types of teams, but it just doesn't seem that way. He's had his shots at Alabama, even when Ole Miss was pretty comparable to them, and doesn't do that. And I just feel like on the road at Georgia, I just give Kirby Smart, the advantage there. I think he can come up with something to stop Ole Miss's offense, and I don't think Ole Miss can necessarily stop Georgia's offense.
Yeah, the next time Lane Kiffin wins a big game, like on the road, will be like the first time. I mean, I think I took Ole Miss and Krishan Judkins and Jackson Dart, and like their offense it's really sexy to cover against Alabama. And that was when Bama was struggling earlier this year.
Yeah.
And Bama won like 24-10, right? I'm not, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I will not be wrong betting on Ole Miss again. Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Ole Miss, they've had some kind of gutsy wins here. I mean, they lost that game against Alabama, but then they edged out LSU, who went toe-to-toe with Bama there for a little while before Daniels exited and things kind of fell apart for them, including last week against a pretty talented Texas A&M team, edged them out 38-35. Still, I just really like what I've seen from Georgia the last few weeks. Missouri was tough. I mean, that is the team who I feel like Missouri, whoever they match up with in their bowl game, you might, that's one you store away for future betting purposes is maybe, hey, watch out whoever Mizzou plays in the non-SEC crossover there where they're playing other teams from different conferences because they're tough. But Georgia just kind of squeezed the life out of them throughout that game. And have you guys looked at Georgia's offensive stats? I mean, this is the Bulldogs not the Bulldogs of old. I mean, they're 6th in passing, 325 yards a game, 6th in total offense, 10th in scoring. Like,
and Brock Bowers has been out like 2 months.
I know, and they're still doing this. So, I mean, this is just. I think this Georgia team is really turning a corner. They're only like 2-6 against the spread this season, and so I think they're due for some of these late covers here late in the year.
Don't overlook.
You're shaking your head.
Don't overlook Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey all the way. I like the guy's name. And
I was going to say that's got to be the only reason.
Yeah. It sounds like a guy out of like one of those old like childhood football books. Like,
like it's like a Newt Rockne
player. Yeah, Ladd McConkey. Yeah.
All right. Speaking of old school, let's finish off with Utah, one of the old school football teams that we watch every Saturday. At Washington, who had a game for the ages against USC. That was, I mean, when those two games, the USC, Washington, and LSU, Alabama games are both going on, you guys were at the Michigan game. I had all 3 games lined up, and I was just like, all right, this is why being an editor and not going to the games, like, this is the day where it pays off, because that was like football heaven, dude. Touchdowns like every 2 seconds. NFL guys all over the place. Caleb Williams making crazy plays. Penix making like an Aaron Rodgers-esque throw.
You keep rubbing it in. Thanks.
But well, listen, if you go to the college football playoff and the Lions make a Super Bowl and you're traveling out there, listen,
that's true.
You can rub it in my face. So anyways, that's a long way of saying Washington is a 9.5-point favorite over Utah. Tony, who you got in this one?
I mean, can we just have a moment for Washington against USC? Just the freest money last week of all time. I hope everybody jumped on. Just keep fading USC and keep making your money. I know they're not involved in this game. Washington, I say this after they just put up 52, but Washington's offense in late October kind of hit a little bit of a wall, right? Like they're putting up 30, 28. They didn't look great. I think, maybe they might be hitting that stride again. But Utah's defense travels. They've been playing without Cam Rising all year, so they know how to. I mean, it's no longer a backup quarterback situation. This is just your guy and who you roll with, and Johnson. And they have a great defense. 10 is a lot of points, and so it's sort of a similar philosophy with Michigan State and Ohio State. I'm just kind of. I don't really think Utah has a chance to win this game. But I will just sort of plug my nose and hold my breath and take the points.
I don't want to use the transitive property here, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because Oregon beat Utah 35-6, and Washington beat Utah at Washington. This game's being played at Washington. It's a tough place to play, and I just think again Washington has too much firepower and a good enough defense to keep Utah down. So I think that's what creates the margin. So I have Washington covering.
This is a tough one, I think, honestly, because Pac-12, I've been banging this drum all year. Like they kind of beat up on each other, but a little bit less in the last few weeks. But first of all, that was a really big game last week for Washington. I mean, that they got up for that game. It was on the road at the Coliseum. All the slabs were out. Like it just had that big game feel. So it's going to be tough for them to get up 2 weeks in a row here. Utah coming into town. I think that Utah could kind of maybe jump off to that early, like, oh my God, they're up 7-0. Oh, they're 10-0. Next thing you know, Washington's playing from behind a little bit. And like Tony said, you just take the 9.5 points and hold on for dear life there. They haven't exactly been blowing people out either. They won by 7 over Arizona, 9 over Stanford, 8 over Arizona State, 10 over USC, which ended up covering pretty easily, as Tony mentioned earlier. But I don't think that the 9.5 is – the 9.5 would scare me on the Washington side. Let's just say that. So I'm going to roll with Utah on this one.
All right. Well, there you have. I don't know. There's been no one really to tail and no one to fade because we're all just slightly above 500, which I think is good for us. So I don't know who to tell people who to follow, but hopefully they've been doing well as they bet along with us. What's that?
Well, if it is like a true regress to the mean situation, you should follow me this week, which is also Tony because he copied me on every single pick. But Tony was 3-1 last week. And now picked all the same games as me. I was 1-3 last week and picked all the same games. So I guess we'll find out who really is going to return to the mean here.
Right. Well, here you go. Reiner and you had the same. Reiner had different picks, and you and him have the same record, right? So had I picked what he picked, then you'd be. So I mean, there's when you're at the top, everyone's coming for you. I guess this is what Michigan keeps saying, right? What are you going to do? But
you're getting everybody's best game.
Yep. That's what happens. But no, seriously, thanks to both of you. And before I give our normal thank yous, I want to give a particular shout out to Barry Ostro, who sent me a very nice email, part of which I will share. As we always ask people to rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. I'm not sure if Barry has done those things. But he did send a very nice message that we'll share. So he grew up in Detroit. He actually delivered the Detroit News when he was a teen. We won't hold that against him. And moved to North Carolina in the late after he went to Michigan in 66 and 73. And he said he's listened to Hail Yes. Appreciate your thorough and in-depth discussion and what's going well and what's not going well with the team. You and Reiner are easy and fun to listen to as you look at the college sports at U of M and MSU. Thank you for what you're doing and contributing in a positive and honest way in describing and evaluating sports as it should be. I'm sure he throws Andrew in there as well because he's very much a part of the team as well. And so I just wanted to end on that note. So people are enjoying this. That is very good. And if you do as well, share any of the same sentiments as Barry, please rate, review, and subscribe. Not only does it help us, it makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. So that's great too. So thanks to Barry. Thanks to our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery-Nichols, our executive editor, Anjanette Delgado, our sports editor, Kirkland Crawford, our audio engineer, Robin Chan, and Andrew and Reiner again as well. For them, I'm Tony. The next time you hear from us, we will have been in Happy Valley, and there will be a very important football game to discuss. So we look forward to it. Till then, be safe. This is Hail Yes.